This is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and today we're looking at a second submission by Julie of her horse Taz. Taz, as you can see, is a 4-year-old fjord. She says she tried using the shambone on the horse and that the low side reins work better, and that's understandable and also an experience that I've had before. It's the way these horses are put together. They're very thick in the neck and very thick at the throat latch, which can make them a bit of a challenge to get to stretch, but they can. So as you can see there, she hasn't been working the horse too consistently, so she's going back to the lunging, which is just exactly what you should do. If horse hasn't been in regular work, it's a good idea to use the lunge to bring them back gradually, so we just don't throw weight up on their back and expect them to hold it up if they haven't been doing so for a while. And I think for this type of horse, you have the side reins on about the best way you could for this horse, which is down low. What we would want to do is just try to lengthen them a little bit as time goes on here. But once again, as you can see, because of the type of horse this is, I mean, they're like a little mini draft horse, so to speak. So not really designed for dressage work, so to speak. These horses that are heavy and in workhorse kind of mode are built more for, packing horse, being used as a pack horse or pulling something, this kind of thing. And they can be a bit of a challenge as riding horses, but they certainly can become them, and good ones and stout ones and sound ones. So what I'd say about these side reins is just trying to get them, as soon as she stretches, trying to get them even longer. The stretch is pretty good here. And for this type of horse, once again, the way they're built, they're quite heavy, short-legged, so it's hard to get a big swinging walk out of them, but you still want to try as much as you can. And this is looking pretty good, really. As I said, as soon as you get him stretched, I still would like to see you get the side reins a little longer because she tends to curl back just a little bit. But you may need to keep her here for a while and just experiment with that as you can get the side reins longer without her throwing head up in the air. That would be the thing to do. So again, every horse has a little different conformation. This one looks like it has a pretty stout back and hasn't dropped too much in the back. The horse looks like it's got quite a bit of weight it's carrying, but of course, once again, that's the type of horse that it is. But also why it's so important, very often people think that these big horses and draft horses are, because they are so stout, that they're very strong in the back. Well, actually, nothing could be further from the truth, and we often see them that are sway back because the weight of their own bodies, if you don't work them correctly, tends to pull their back down if they get a little overweight. True of all kinds of draft horses, and especially the bigger workhorses like the Friesians, which were never designed to be ridden and are very long in the back. And most of them that I see these days are sway back because people who are a little bit on the heavy side buy them thinking they're big enough to carry them, and when in fact they're longer backed and built kind of downhill, even though their necks come so straight up out of the shoulders, which is what fools people. They think they can just pull those necks over and the back is going to be fine. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. So these horses take a little more care, but for this type of horse, this is actually a pretty good walk. He's walking pretty regularly. Very often we see these types of horses will barely pick up their legs and kind of look like they're pulling their feet out of mud. But this one's actually walking quite nicely, nice step once again. These kinds of horses are built a little straight behind, so you're not going to get the biggest flexion in the world out of the hocks, but for this type of horse, this is actually doing quite well. Pretty good regular walk. Once again, I'd still like to see the neck stretch even more, and as she gets stretching, you could lengthen those side reins a little bit. But this is all quite good for the type of horse it is. Now you can see how the horse kind of braces there when you slow down there, kind of braced against those side reins, and that's typical. Once again, not a bad walk once it got going there. It was kind of interesting there for a moment. She seemed to be short stepping on the inside hind leg, but that seemed to straighten out. Seemed to be a momentary thing. I like how you're keeping the horse on these big circles, nothing too small. And good, that's a better stretch. After every little bit of trot work there, I like how he stretches his neck out a little more. So I think you're on the right path with that for this horse. When you look at how this horse's neck is conformed, it's pretty stretched out there. So once again, we always have to take the individual conformation of each horse. So often where people go wrong in dressage today is that they're trying to make every horse fit into a certain look, so to speak. And once again, once we understand what real collection is, that is once a horse working over its top line, that it lowers the three joints of the hind leg, and the degree of the quality of the collection being the degree to which the horse maintains that lowering. Once again, if you want to see a perfect example of this, watch Charlotte Desjardins on her horse, who won the last Olympics and just broke some records. And it's so great to see somebody doing it right, getting back out there and winning after the sort of 20 years we've seen of roll-curring horses and some of the sort of horror things that we've seen dressage turn into. It's nice to see that we're finally starting to swing back in the other direction, which is wonderful. And once again, not a bad walk. Horse stepping up pretty well. Once again, for this horse's conformation, that's quite nice how she's stretching there. So I like how you're going about this, just giving the horse plenty of time to stretch out in the walk, little bits of trot, and then back to the walk again, all very good. And once again, I really like how you're keeping the horse on a really nice big circle. Good, and that's pretty active trot right there. It's about there. I think you could start lengthening those side reins just a little bit more than they are right there. Try to get a little more stretch out of the neck. But once again, for the type of neck that this is doing quite well. Pretty regular walk there. So I would like to see this horse carrying maybe a few less pounds. But I know that can be a real challenge with these type of horses. They tend to be quite easy keepers. So again, not a bad trot. And there was a lot less resistance in the bridle that time when you made that transition, so that's good. Generally speaking, as you see with some of my horses that I show you videos of, that once they learn to stretch, I don't even use side reins on them. I just let them stretch all the way out. That's sort of how we know that it's kind of a natural thing for horses to go into these frames. When I start babies, they stretch right away and they stay there, if I don't stop them from doing so, because that feels comfortable to them. And that's the whole point of this style of riding, is that we're putting the horse in a position that allows him to do his work in the most comfortable manner, and therefore they give up a lot of the resistance, and so we don't force them into things that they can't actually do, which you're certainly not doing here. I think this is about right, what you're doing with this horse, and for the type of horse that this is. I like how the stretch is starting to come there in the neck a little more. Once again, it's quite a regular walk, not bad at all for this type of horse. Actually got a pretty good step behind, pretty good flexion and a hock in the steps. Very often we see these kind of heavier horses and they just kind of move their back legs, I say, like they're stuck in mud, or they have almost no flexion at all in the hocks. And those can often be the hardest types of horses to train because they're just so difficult to get underneath themselves the straighter the hind leg is. So I think you're doing quite a good job with this one. Seems quite amenable to the work. There, and like how he stretches out, he gets to about there. So once again, I keep trying to lengthen those side reins over time so you can get his head and neck to come out a little bit more from the base of the shoulder. But once again, for this type of horse, this is quite good. So that walk work is good. I would have liked to have seen your trot get a little more consistent and stay there once you got into the trot work. That is to keep it a little more consistent and for a little longer period of time. But other than that, that was quite good. This one thing I'd point out is try to get in the habit when you're lunging and working around the horse to not drop the whip on the ground, but just put it backwards under your arm as you approach the horse. Of course, you were had plenty of distance from the horse when you picked that up, but very often people they drop the whip and then they start the horse and reach down to get the whip and get kicked in the face. So it's always best to keep that whip under your arm. What I do is just turn it around backwards and put the handle under my arm as I approach the horse, so I have both my arms free still. In other words, I'm holding the whip under my arm, so to speak, instead of dropping it on the ground so I don't have to bend over. Now, once again, you were plenty far away from the horses and out of the strike zone, as I like to say, of the hind legs, but generally it's just good to get in the habit of not dropping it. And once again, not a bad walk for this horse. That's really quite good. That's pretty regular. Once again, I'd still like to see the neck stretching out longer, but I think that will happen over time. There, I like that last stretch. See, when you get to there, I get the feeling that you could have the side reins a little bit longer and we could get even a little bit more stretch out of them. And also remember, while you're doing a lot of walk here, that's perfectly all right. You know, the great thing about the walk is we can do a lot of it. And you can actually develop horses to a pretty high degree by just walking them, you know. Years ago, in my early days, in my 20s, I worked fox hunters on the East Coast for a living. And, you know, at the end of fox hunting season, horses are turned out, and we'd bring them back, and we would spend really at least a month bringing them back, just walking them out on the trails and getting them open and swinging, stretching. And you can develop a lot of top line. I've rehabbed a lot of horses as well in my life, and we have to do a lot of walk with them. If you can get them over their backs in the walk, you can develop a great deal of muscle without ever going into a trot. Of course, people often talk to me about, oh, well, should I take my horse up and down hills, and will that help him build more in the walk? And the answer to that question is yes, if the horse is working over its top line, but if the horse is hollow and you work them up and down hills, it's only going to exacerbate your problem. So you must put that as a little caveat. Yes, working up and down hills and over poles and all the different things we do with horses are great for them, but only if the horse is working over its back. If the horse is hollow, all it's going to do is pull you up a hill with its shoulders instead of engaging behind. Same thing coming down a hill. Good, and I like the activity of this walk. And once again, as I said, for this type of heavy horse, this is really very good. And I think your approach with the side reins is just about the right one, probably the best thing you could do. There, that's a better trot now. And you can see how for a moment there the horse kind of braced against the side reins, but then it relaxed back down again. Good when you come back to the walk after that trot. It's a little more active, a little more stepping. But once again, for this type of horse, that's really quite a good walk. Starts in the trot there without any major resistance. Good. I like how every time you trot, you come back and he seems to stretch his neck out a little bit more, so that's very good. Good regular work here. Now I would like to see your trot, your little periods of trot go a little bit longer with the horse. But other than that, this is really quite good. And as I said before, keep trying to get those side reins a little bit longer. Another good transition. No major bracing there. Good. Once again, the trot work is quite good. I just like to see you try to get a little more active. And once you can see those side reins are a little bit on the short side, it does hold the neck in a little bit. So really just trying to get those side reins a little bit longer when you can. Now, once again, I understand these types of horses can be quite a challenge to get to stretch and get them working over their backs, but you will be able to improve that. So the biggest thing I would say here is I would just like to have seen a little more trot work. That is, let it go a little more consistently and see if the horse will start to stretch a little more. Seems like he just starts to get going and you bring him back to a walk. So I would like to see a little more consistency in that trot work, which I think you can get now. The walk is quite good. And what I saw of the trot, once again, for this type of horse, looked quite good. Just needs to get a little more consistent and stay there. In the trot, that is. Giving him a chance to just sort of adjust and get stretching a little more in the trot before you bring him right back to a walk. Could be a little bit more active. I like to see you send him on just a little bit more than that. It's a little better there. And once again, we see how the side reins just kind of keep him back a little too much. So I'd like to see those a little bit longer. Then I'd like to see your trot work just extended a little bit. So you get to the point where I get the sense of him reaching a little more in the trot work. And I think you're going to have to stay in the trot a little longer to get that. So quite a good walk. Again, same here. I feel like, there he goes. He starts to stretch a little bit. See how he hits those side reins. So those side reins really need to be a little bit longer. Because he tends to want to go down. I see at the moment that he wants to stretch, there's not enough room in the side reins for him to stretch the nose on out. So we don't want to curl him back. Remember, we never want the horse's face, so to speak, to be behind the vertical, which he's doing a little bit there in that length of side rein. So we want him to stretch out and let the neck come out and forward a little more. But as you said, you're just getting back to getting the horse back into regular work. So doing the walk work is a great way to do that, and lots of it. As I said, the walk is a very low impact gait, so we can do a lot of work getting the horse over its back without pounding on the horse's feet. Pretty good walk there. So just to reiterate, the biggest things I'd like to see you get into the trot and stay there a little longer. I'd like to see him stretch a little more. I'd like to see you get those side reins a little. I think you've got them in about the best place for this body style horse and where he's at, just a little bit longer. And then get him into the trot and keep him there and see if he won't then stretch into it. That's a little better trot there. It's got a little more activity. But you see how my feeling is that the side reins are bringing him a little bit behind the vertical. So try just lengthening. Even if he comes up a little bit, try keeping the horse working with a little bit longer side reins and give him time in the trot to start to want to seek that stretch. You know, there's lots of different styles of horses and body styles and within gait themselves and conformation faults and issues that we have to deal with. But they're all very interesting and they all end up at the same place. Well, that is what our goal is, to get them over their back. They're all going to improve. They're all going to stay sound longer, no matter what the body style is or their conformation issues. So once again, a little more consistent in the trot, a little bit longer in the side reins. Once again, you see him curling the back. We want to avoid that, so try to get those a little bit longer, even if he's a little more above the bit for a moment, till he starts to stretch out and stretch down. So next time I see, you'd like to see a little more consistency in the trot, as we keep it for, you know, a few minutes at a time at least. But great work. Keep up the good work. It will continue to improve. It looks like a wonderful animal and a great friend. Once again, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride. Look forward to seeing your next submission. Keep up the good work. That's a happy horse right there. It's nice and sleepy now after that big workout. Great job. See you next time at Art to Ride.